My wife emptied our accounts while I cared for her sick mother alone, so I documented everything, filed charges, and left her with no warning. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and for most of my marriage, I believed love meant showing up quietly and consistently, even when no one was watching, even when no one said thank you. I thought loyalty was measured by how much you were willing to carry without complaining. If things got heavy, you didn't drop them. You adjusted your grip. Everything changed when my wife's mother got sick. It wasn't sudden, but it was serious. Hospital visits that stretched into hours, prescriptions that piled up on the kitchen counter, nights where the beeping of medical equipment replaced sleep. My wife shut down almost immediately. I remember her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, saying, "I can't handle this. I just can't." Her voice was flat, distant, like she was already somewhere else. So I stepped in. I told myself that was marriage. I took unpaid leave from work. I learned how to organize medications by color and time. I cooked bland meals that wouldn't upset her mother's stomach, helped her bathe, lifted her into bed, drove back and forth to appointments that smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. The days blurred together, hospital hallways, dim waiting rooms, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above my head. My wife became a shadow in the house. She was working late, too exhausted, emotionally overwhelmed. Sometimes she wouldn't even ask how her mom was doing. I didn't push. I told myself grief looks different on everyone. I believed vows weren't about fairness, they were about endurance. She handled most of our finances, and that never bothered me. When I asked, she'd smile tightly and say, "Everything's under control. Don't worry about money right now. Just focus on mom." And I believed her, because trusting your spouse is supposed to be the easy part. At night, I'd sit alone at the kitchen table after everyone was asleep, my hands smelling faintly of soap and antiseptic, my back aching, telling myself this was temporary. That sacrifice didn't need applause. That love was quiet. I had no idea that while I was giving everything in plain sight, something irreversible was already happening behind my back. I didn't realize how invisible I was becoming until my days started blending into each other without any markers. Morning, afternoon, night, it was all the same cycle of pills, meals, appointments, and silence. I'd wake up before sunrise to the sound of my phone alarm, already tired, already bracing myself. The house smelled like reheated soup and antiseptic wipes. My wife was usually gone by then, or still asleep, turned away from me like the space between us had weight. Caring for her mother drained me in ways I didn't know how to explain. I was always alert, always listening for a cough, a call, a fall. My shoulders stayed tense, my jaw clenched. Friends stopped checking in after I kept saying, "I'm fine." Work emails piled up unanswered. I told myself this was just a season, that real partners didn't keep score during emergencies. My wife, on the other hand, became increasingly distant. She'd come home late, drop her keys on the counter without looking at me, and head straight for the shower. When I tried to talk, she'd sigh and say, "Can we not do this right now? I've had a long day." If I mentioned being tired, she'd snap back, "You think you're the only one stressed?" There were moments, small, nagging moments, that made my stomach tighten. A notification lighting up her phone that she flipped face down too fast. A sudden password lock on her banking app when it had always been open before. When I asked casually, she laughed and said, "Why are you acting paranoid?" I felt embarrassed for even asking. Money got tighter, or at least that's what she said. I covered groceries, gas, and small medical supplies from our savings without thinking twice. "It's temporary," she reassured me. "Once this is over, everything will balance out." I wanted to believe that so badly that I ignored how alone I felt standing at the pharmacy counter, card in hand, praying it wouldn't decline. Late one night, after settling her mother into bed, I sat on the living room floor with my back against the couch, staring at the dark TV screen. My chest felt heavy, like something was pressing down from the inside. I remember thinking, "I'm holding everything together, but nothing feels stable anymore. I didn't know it then, but that feeling wasn't exhaustion, it was instinct, trying to warn me of what was coming next. The first real crack in everything came on a random Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that already felt too heavy before it even started. Her mom had a sudden reaction to one of her medications, and I rushed her to the pharmacy to get a replacement. I remember standing in line, fluorescent lights humming above me, the smell of plastic and paper receipts in the air. My leg wouldn't stop bouncing. When it was my turn, I slid our card across the counter without thinking. I'd done it 100 times before. The cashier frowned at the screen, tapped a few keys, then tried again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, lowering her voice. "It's not going through." My stomach dropped. "That's not possible," I said, a little too fast. "Can you try again?" She did. Same result. I felt heat rush to my face as the people behind me shifted impatiently. I pulled out my phone and opened our banking app, expecting to see a glitch or a delay. Instead, I saw numbers that didn't make sense. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Not just low, wrong. My hand started shaking so badly I had to grip the counter. I paid with a credit card and walked out, my chest tight, my thoughts racing. Sitting in the car, I refreshed the app again and again, hoping it would correct itself. It didn't. Transactions I didn't recognize stared back at me, transfers, withdrawals, purchases spaced out over weeks. Weeks I'd spent sleeping on a chair beside a hospital bed. That night, after her mom was settled, I brought it up carefully. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "do you know why the account's so low?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "What are you talking about?" "The card declined today," I said. I checked the balance. "It's not right." She sighed hard, like I was the problem. "I told you things are tight right now. Reimbursements are delayed. You're stressing over nothing." "But there are transfers I don't recognize," I said. "Can you explain those?" She finally looked at me, eyes sharp. "Why are you going through our account like that?" she snapped. "Do you not trust me?" The room went quiet. I felt small, ashamed, like I'd crossed some line I didn't know existed. "I just wanted to understand," I said softly. She shook her head. "This is the worst time for you to start questioning me." I apologized that night, for asking. But as I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, that sinking feeling in my chest told me this wasn't just bad timing. Something was very, very wrong. After that night, the air between us changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was sharp and tense, like walking barefoot on a floor covered in glass you couldn't see. I became careful with my words, measuring every sentence before I spoke. Every time I even thought about money, my chest tightened. A few days later, while helping her mom back into bed, I mentioned casually, "We might need to budget a little tighter this month. Just until things settle." My wife's face hardened instantly. "Are you seriously bringing this up now?" she said, her voice low but biting. "My mother is sick, and all you care about is money." "That's not what I meant," I said quickly. "I'm just trying to make sure we're okay." She scoffed. "You're acting controlling. I can't believe you'd add stress like this when I'm already drowning." The word controlling hit me harder than I expected. I replayed it in my head all night. Was I? I'd never questioned her spending before. I'd trusted her completely. Still, the guilt crept in fast, wrapping around my thoughts like fog. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was missing something obvious. Any time I asked a small question after that, she turned it into a character flaw. "Why do you need to know every detail? Do you not trust your own wife?" Normal husbands don't interrogate their spouses during a family crisis. Eventually, I stopped asking. I kept paying for groceries, gas, and supplies for her mom without mentioning it. I told myself it was easier this way. The house felt colder, quieter. We barely talked unless it was about schedules or medications. When I sat at the table late at night, sorting pills under the yellow kitchen light, I felt like a stranger in my own life. One evening, exhausted and running on fumes, I said, "I'm really tired. I could use some help." She didn't even look up from the couch. "You're the one who said you could handle this," she replied. "Don't put that on me." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I told myself this was temporary. That once her mom recovered, things would go back to normal. But deep down, something twisted uncomfortably inside me, because it felt less like I was being misunderstood, and more like I was being managed. And the more silent I became, the more confident she seemed. The midpoint hit me in the most unglamorous way possible, through a billing mistake that forced me to stop trusting explanations and start looking at facts. The hospital called one afternoon about an unpaid charge they said had been overdue for weeks. I apologized automatically and told them there must be an error. "We've been paying everything," I said, still defending a system I hadn't fully seen. They asked me to email proof of payment. So I called the bank. I remember standing in the hallway outside her mom's room, the air smelling faintly of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables, my phone pressed tight to my ear. The representative spoke calmly, professionally, like she wasn't about to change my life. She walked me through the account history step by step. Dates. Amounts. Destinations. My stomach sank with every line. There were transfers I didn't recognize, large ones. Regular ones. Withdrawals that didn't match any bill, any medical expense, any household cost. Online purchases made while I was sitting in waiting rooms. Payments scheduled during nights I slept upright in a chair beside a hospital bed. This wasn't one mistake. It wasn't mismanagement. It was a pattern. I felt dizzy. I leaned against the wall, my vision narrowing, my heart pounding so hard I thought someone would hear it through the phone. I asked the representative to repeat the dates. She did. They lined up perfectly with the weeks I'd been caregiving full-time. Weeks I hadn't checked anything because I trusted her. When I hung up, I didn't confront my wife. I didn't scream or cry or throw anything. I walked back into the room, adjusted her mother's blanket, and smiled like nothing had happened. Inside, something cracked so cleanly it almost felt quiet. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through transaction histories until the screen blurred. Each entry felt like a small betrayal, stacked on top of the last. I realized something terrifying in that moment, not just that the money was gone, but that she'd felt safe enough to take it while I was distracted, exhausted, and emotionally cornered. Trust didn't explode. It drained out of me slowly, leaving behind a cold, hollow clarity. And for the first time since this all started, I didn't feel confused. I felt alert. I didn't explode the way people expect you to when you find out you've been betrayed. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even let my face change. Instead, something in me went very still, like my emotions hit a wall and shut off for self-preservation. I decided to document everything. It started small. Screenshots of the account history. Downloaded statements. I emailed copies to myself from an address she didn't know about. I started a private folder in cloud storage and named it something boring so it wouldn't stand out. Every transaction I didn't recognize, I logged with dates and notes. I stopped asking questions out loud and started collecting answers quietly. At home, I acted normal. Too normal. I cooked, cleaned, drove her mom to appointments, nodded when my wife talked about work stress. When she said, "Thanks for handling everything," I smiled and said, "Of course." Inside, my chest felt hollow, like I was watching my life from behind glass. The strange thing was how relaxed she became once I stopped asking about money. The tension she'd carried melted away. She left her phone out more often. She laughed more. One night she even said, "I'm glad you finally trust me again." I swallowed hard and didn't respond. Her carelessness grew with my silence. More transfers appeared. Bigger ones. Faster. I watched them show up in real time while sitting across from her at the dinner table. I'd excuse myself to the bathroom, lock the door, and screenshot everything with my hands shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I'd sit in the dark living room, the glow of my laptop reflecting off the window, organizing evidence while the house stayed eerily quiet. My heart didn't race like before. My anger wasn't hot. It was cold, focused, and sharp. I realized something then that scared me more than the money ever could. She didn't think she'd ever be held accountable. And the moment I understood that, I knew this wasn't going to end with a conversation. It happened late one night while I was cross-checking transfers against our known bills. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards as the heat kicked on. I was tired, wired, and running on instinct more than logic. One transfer caught my eye, not because of the amount, but because of the destination. It wasn't a utility. It wasn't medical. It wasn't even a savings account. It was a personal account. I clicked deeper. Then deeper again. My hands went cold. There were repeated transfers to the same name. Consistent timing. Consistent amounts. Always after I'd been gone all day with her mom. Always when I was too exhausted to notice anything beyond getting everyone through the night. I googled the name, not expecting much. What came up made my stomach drop. Photos. Social posts. Tags. A person she'd mentioned casually before. Someone she said was just a friend. Someone who lived very comfortably for a person with no visible income. Someone whose lifestyle suddenly matched the money missing from our accounts. I sat back in my chair, my pulse thudding in my ears. This wasn't impulse spending. This wasn't panic. This was calculated. Planned. Sustained. I scrolled through months of transactions and felt something inside me finally shut off. Not heartbreak. Not rage. Detachment. I realized I hadn't just been financially betrayed. I'd been strategically used. My exhaustion wasn't collateral damage, it was part of the setup. While I was bathing her mother and sleeping in chairs, my wife was funding a life that didn't include me at all. The most unsettling part wasn't the evidence. It was how calm I felt once the truth was undeniable. Like my body had been bracing for this long before my mind caught up. I closed my laptop and sat there in the dark, listening to the quiet house. Love didn't break that night. It evaporated. And in its place was something far more dangerous, clarity, paired with patience. Because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And exactly how careful I needed to be next. Rock bottom didn't come with yelling or tears or some dramatic collapse. It came quietly, the way exhaustion finally catches you when adrenaline wears off. It was after another long hospital day. Her mom had a rough night, and I'd barely slept. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. When I parked, I didn't go inside right away. I just sat there in the dark, engine off, dashboard still glowing faintly. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath no matter how hard I tried. I remember thinking, I am doing everything right, so why does my life feel like it's already over? Inside the house, my wife was on the couch, scrolling on her phone. She barely looked up. "You're late," she said flatly. "Hospital ran long," I replied. She sighed like I'd inconvenienced her. "Well, I already ate." Something in me cracked then, not loudly, not visibly. I nodded and walked into the kitchen, staring at the cold leftovers on the counter. The room smelled like reheated food and stale air. I suddenly felt so alone it made my stomach hurt. Later that night, after getting her mom settled, I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the floor with my back against the tub. The tile was cold through my clothes. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from making a sound as tears finally came. Not sobbing, just silent, shaking breaths. I cried for the version of myself who thought love was proven by suffering. I cried because I realized no one in that house was worried about me at all. The darkest thought hit me then: if I disappeared tomorrow, would anything actually stop? That scared me more than the betrayal. I wiped my face, stood up, and looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the man staring back, sunken eyes, hollow expression, someone who'd been surviving instead of living. That was the moment I understood I couldn't keep absorbing this and expect to survive it. I wasn't just tired. I was breaking. And if I didn't choose myself soon, there might not be anything left to save. The next morning, after dropping her mom off for another appointment, I didn't go home. I drove across town to a small office building I'd found the night before while sitting on the bathroom floor, phone glowing in the dark. A family law attorney. The sign outside was plain, almost boring. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so life-altering could exist behind such an unremarkable door. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and coffee. I sat in a stiff chair and laid everything out: caregiving, the accounts, the transfers, the screenshots. My voice shook at first, but the more I talked, the steadier I became. The attorney didn't interrupt much. She just listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What you're describing isn't just marital conflict. It's financial abuse." The words landed heavy in my chest. She explained it slowly: how draining shared accounts without consent, especially during a period of dependency and emotional vulnerability, crossed legal lines. How documentation mattered. How intent mattered. How patterns mattered. She told me I'd done the right thing by not confronting my wife yet. "You didn't overreact," she said firmly, like she could see the doubt carved into me. "You protected yourself." I felt something loosen in my chest for the first time in months. Not relief, validation. We talked about options. Legal separation. Asset protection. Filing reports. Consequences I'd been too afraid to even imagine. The power dynamics shifted right there, in that quiet office. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't imagining things. When I walked back to my car, the sun felt too bright, like the world hadn't gotten the memo that my life had just split in two. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My thoughts were sharp. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting to what she did. I was planning what I was going to do next. And she still had no idea that the ground under her feet had already started to give way. A week after meeting with the attorney, I took a day off under the excuse of running errands. My wife didn't question it. She rarely questioned anything anymore. I drove to the bank first, then to a government office, then back to the attorney's building. Each stop felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. I filed the reports quietly. I handed over printed statements, timelines, screenshots, everything I'd documented during those long nights in the dark. The clerk spoke in a neutral tone, asking procedural questions, stamping forms like this was just another file in a stack. I kept thinking, if she knew where I was right now, she'd panic. That thought didn't bring me joy. It brought me clarity. When it was done, I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt empty, but grounded. Like I'd finally stopped bleeding. At home, I acted like nothing had changed. I made dinner. I helped her mom settle in. I listened while my wife complained about work and money stress, completely unaware of the irony. At one point she laughed and said, "I'm glad you're not freaking out like you were before." I almost smiled. Behind the scenes, I locked down what little remained. New accounts. New passwords. Quiet safeguards. I followed every instruction I'd been given, step by step. No confrontation. No warning. Just clean lines and careful timing. That night, lying beside her in bed, I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone. I wondered how someone could sleep so peacefully while standing on the edge of consequences they couldn't see yet. I realized something then. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. I was doing it to stop the damage, and to make sure the truth existed somewhere outside of me. She reached over and squeezed my hand absently, like muscle memory. I squeezed back. And she still had no idea that everything she thought was secure had already slipped out of her control. I didn't pack everything. Just what mattered: documents, a few clothes, my laptop, the folder with copies of everything. I moved slowly, deliberately, like any sudden movement might shatter the fragile calm I'd built. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the heater and the ticking clock in the hallway. It felt wrong how normal everything looked. I waited for the right morning. My wife left early for work, rushing out the door with a distracted kiss on my cheek. "I'll be late," she said. "Meetings." "Okay," I replied, steady, familiar. As soon as her car pulled away, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for months. I helped her mom settle into her chair, made sure her medications were laid out, wrote down instructions she already knew by heart. She thanked me softly, eyes tired but kind. The irony nearly broke me. I swallowed it down. Then I left. No note. No explanation. No confrontation. I drove to the small apartment I'd arranged in secret and turned off my phone. When I finally checked it hours later, there were missed calls. Then texts. "Where are you? This isn't funny. We need to talk." I didn't respond. By evening, the tone shifted. Confusion turned into anger. Anger into panic. I blocked her number and let the legal channels take over, just like I'd been told. Silence felt brutal, but also clean. For the first time in years, nothing was being demanded from me. That night, alone in a bare room with boxes stacked against the wall, I sat on the floor and let the quiet wash over me. My chest hurt, but it wasn't the suffocating pressure I'd lived with for months. This pain felt honest. I knew consequences were unfolding without me. Questions she couldn't dodge. Explanations she couldn't gaslight away. A narrative she no longer controlled. And as strange as it sounds, walking away without a word wasn't cruelty. It was the only way I could finally speak for myself. The weeks that followed were quiet. Too quiet at first. I moved through my days slowly, almost cautiously, like my body didn't trust peace yet. I slept on a mattress on the floor, woke up without alarms, and ate when I was hungry instead of when someone else needed me. The silence felt unfamiliar, but it didn't hurt. I learned things through the proper channels, filtered and distant. The documentation mattered. The patterns mattered. For once, the truth wasn't something I had to argue for or defend. It simply existed. Knowing that gave me a strange sense of closure, even without a final conversation. At night, memories still surfaced: hospital lights, her voice accusing me of being controlling, the weight of responsibility pressing down on my chest. But they didn't own me anymore. I started seeing how deeply I'd confused endurance with love, and how easy it was for someone to take advantage of that. I used to think walking away without explanation was cowardly. Now I understand it was necessary. Some people don't want resolution, they want access. And the moment I removed mine, the cycle ended. One morning, weeks later, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and actually recognized myself. The hollow look was gone. My shoulders were relaxed. I looked steady. Not happy yet, but grounded. Real. I don't know what she tells people. I don't care. I don't need to be understood by someone who benefited from my silence. What I know is this: I didn't lose my marriage the day I left. I lost it the moment I stopped being seen as a partner and started being treated like a resource. Walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the first honest decision I'd made in a very long time.